Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions, here to talk about The X-Files, Season 1, Episode 2, Deep Throat. The episode's description reads as follows. Mulder and Scully investigate the mysterious case of a military test pilot who disappeared after experiencing strange psychotic behavior. The episode was directed by Daniel Sackheim. Obviously, this is his first stint on the series. He would direct 5 more episodes of the series in total. He would also direct Chris Carter's other projects, 3 episodes of Harsh Realm, including the pilot episode that my crush, Carla Mack, happened to work on, and 1 episode of Millennium. He seems to have made a career out of directing on my favorite TV series, including 7 episodes of House MD, 2 episodes of Ozark, and Better Call Saul, and he also had work on Lost. In addition to his 51 directorial credits, he also has 29 producer credits. He's still working to this day, and continues to add to his impressive resume. The episode was written by series creator Chris Carter, whom I talked about when I talked about the pilot episode last week. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. 1, this is not a spoiler-free podcast. If you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out and then come back and give me a listen. Secondly, if you're listening to one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please follow, and feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, and subscribe to my channel. Shout out this week goes to Ashley Wright, longtime friend of the channel who seems to follow me everywhere. He commented on this video, despite the fact that he didn't really watch the series and only has vague memories of it at best. If you happen to comment, I will definitely shout you out. So far, my viewership on this is just at the beginning stages. Maybe I'll get some additional ones commenting. Maybe I'll get nothing. Who knows? We'll see. But this is a pretty solid second entry of the series. Carter, as a writer, did great work during the early portions of the series. I'm less enamored with his later work, especially in the revival. All of the worst episodes during the revival series were written by him, but here we have a pretty decent effort from him. We get introduced to Deep Throat, played by Jerry Hardin. He has 167 acting credits, including The Firm, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, 3 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, 2 of which he played Samuel Clemens, a.k.a. Mark Twain. That was the 2-parter that ended Season 5 and began Season 6. And he also appeared in an episode of Star Trek Voyager, Sliders, and amusingly enough, he also appeared in Quantum Leap. Nothing since 2014, but the dude is like 94 years old, so I'm pretty sure he's retired from acting at this point. The character of Deep Throat would only appear in the first season, but he had sporadic cameos throughout the rest of the show. Also in this episode, Dana Scully kicks about 20 kinds of butt in the last act of the episode, demonstrating why she would become a feminist icon. Trivia note, this episode was filmed a year after the pilot episode. And Clyde Kotz, who debuted as the art director for this series in this episode, would go on to marry series star Gillian Anderson and have a baby named Piper, thus leading to Scully's abduction story in the second season. Alright, so on to the scene by scene. We open the episode near Ellens Air Force Base in Idaho. We see a bunch of military running towards a residential house in broad daylight. The wife is trying to convince them to let her talk to him, whoever they are after, but they bash through the doors and run through the house. They find the man they're looking for, curled up in the fetal position with a hideous rash, pretty much all over his body, and just in his underwear. The exterior shot of the house would eventually become Frank Black's house in Millennium. And we have our credits. This is the first time that we will see the regular credits of the series that we all know and love with the X-Files theme. When we come back, we join Scully, who's in a crowded bar. She's soon surprised by Mulder, who offers to buy her a drink, but she points out that it's 2 in the afternoon. But Mulder says, hey, it's not stopping any of these other people. Mulder says he has something to show her, and she's curious as to why he couldn't show her at the office. As they get to the table, a camera lingers on a mysterious man that we will eventually know and love as Deep Throat. Deep Throat was inspired not just by the notorious mold depicted in All the President's Men, and this is according to Internet Movie Database, but also by the character Mr. X, played by Donald Sutherland, in Oliver Stone's JFK. And the funny thing about that is Deep Throat's successor in this series, in the second season, would be called Mr. X. Mulder gives to Scully the rundown of the case, and we get background into what was going on in the opening scene. Colonel Robert Budahas was a test pilot who had some kind of psychotic break. He barricaded himself in his room in his house, so the military police recalled it. He was taken and supposedly hospitalized for the condition the military will not reveal. Mrs. Budahas has not seen or heard her husband in over 4 months, and her questions to the military have been ignored. So she contacted the FBI and reported it as a kidnapping. Scully, amused, asks what reason would they have to kidnap one of their own, and Mulder declares that to be the $64,000 question. The case was deprioritized, so Scully and Mulder are going to investigate. Scully is confused and suspicious. She thought he was only interested in investigating the paranormal. Mulder says that the case has a paranormal bouquet smell and leaves to go to the bathroom, where he encounters Deep Throat for the first time, lurking creepily nearby. He tells him to leave the case alone because the military will not tolerate a military investigation, or rather an FBI investigation. Mulder asks, "Who are you?" And Deep Throat says he can be of help to him. He's had an interest in his work. And someone else tries to get into the bathroom, but it's locked. Mulder asks how he knows about his work. And Deep Throat chuckles and says he's in a position to know quite a lot of things. He says he came here with an important message, not to put himself at unnecessary risk, and Scully for that matter, and to drop the case. He has much work still to do. Deep Throat leaves the bathroom, and Mulder tries to follow him, but he's gone. Scully, from where she's sitting, comes and sees Mulder and asks if he's okay, and Mulder plays it casual and says that he's fine, and says nothing about Deep Throat. At FBI headquarters, Scully does a little research. She calls Mulder after and wonders if he's leading her on a UFO goose chase. Mulder hears some noises and realizes his phone is being tapped. He looks out the window and notices some men watching him. This is the first time we're seeing Mulder's apartment in this series. Mulder tells her he doesn't want to talk about the case on this line and hangs up. We cut to Idaho. They are there to talk to Mrs. Budahas, but not before hearing a loud airborne vehicle, otherwise known as a plane of some type. Mrs. Budahas is played by Gabrielle Rose, who would also appear in the second season episode The Host as a doctor. They've been working around the house, and Mr. Budahas had started to develop a weird rash, and then his behavior became erratic, such as putting fish flakes on his food. You know, I'm actually kind of curious how that would taste. Probably not very good, right? I don't think I'll try it. He would also get angry and yell at the kids for no reason. She just wants to know what's going on. Scully says that the government is not above the law. They can't withhold information. Well, maybe not, but they certainly do. She wonders without saying, what if he's dead? And Mulder asks if anyone else experienced what they had experienced. She mentions another person's husband, but he came home, unlike Mr. Budahas. We cut to the family, that family specifically. The husband is acting weird, kind of like he's mentally out there, as he has for the last 2 years. This wife isn't as thrilled to be talking to them, and speaks highly of the military. Scully, as they exit the house, thinks they might be washouts from the Aurora Project, but Mulder doesn't buy it. A Colonel Kissel says they'll talk to the pair in about a week, so Mulder does what Mulder does, and decides to ambush him at his house. Spoiler alert, this does not go well. They end up being intercepted by a reporter, supposedly, named Paul, who asks him questions and then steers him in the general direction of a place where he can find UFO nuts, which turns out to be a diner. He talks to the waitress until Dana gets annoyed and goes outside. Dana, and actually in this scene, Mulder ends up purchasing a picture of a UFO that she supposedly took outside the diner. She sells the picture for $20, and Scully thinks he's a sucker. Alright, so outside, Dana is looking at a map which doesn't have Ellen's airbase on it. But Mulder already knows this, and he has a map of his own. It looks like to be a hand-drawn map of some kind. They travel down to the Air Force Base, and as they exit the car, Scully asks, what does he honestly hope to see? Mulder says he doesn't know, maybe nothing, and goes up the hill. Scully wonders if this is what they are really doing out here. My money is on yes. Scully yells at him that this is going to look really good on her field report. And oh, by the way, she's being very, very sarcastic. Cut to late at night, Scully is sleeping in her car. An experimental aircraft flies over and shatters the window, giving Scully a rude awakening. We see Mulder run to the car and tell Scully to wake up. Yeah, someone already took care of that for you, Mulder, and says that she has got to see this. They see two objects in the sky making impossible maneuvers, and Mulder says that they've been going at it like that for about a half hour. Scully doesn't think they could be aircraft, that no aircraft could possibly maneuver like these two. She thinks it must be just lights in the sky, but this is soon disproved as the aircraft takes off into the sky and makes a aircraftian sound, if you will. They soon see another light, but this is a helicopter heading in their direction. We soon seen a couple of teens, one of them, played by Seth Green, running. Looking back at the series, you see a lot of actors before they were famous, and this is the first one. Seth Green would later become known as Oz on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. After helping the two teens escape from the helicopter, they take the teens to get some food, and Mulder talks to them a while about their theories. As we pan outside, we see that they are being listened to. In the morning, they drop off the kids, and Scully asks, "You believe it all, don't you?" And Mulder asks, "Why wouldn't I?" Scully suggests that the kids might have been a little bit high. You don't say. Mulder suggests the government is using and flying planes built using alien technology. Scully doesn't buy it, and says that just because she can't explain what she saw doesn't mean she's gonna believe they are UFOs. Mulder comes back with unidentified flying objects. So yeah, that fits the definition of a UFO. He tells her to tell him he's crazy, and she graciously accepts the offer and says that none of this explains what happened to Colonel Budahas. Well, maybe it does, Scully. Next thing you know, Mr. Budahas is actually back. Mrs. Budahas called Mulder and Scully and brings her in to see Budahas and says that's not her husband. Meanwhile, he seems a bit confused. Mulder asks him some questions. Where has he been? And he says he's been at a hospital which he thinks was on base. Mulder asks about his birthday, and Mr. Budahas gets increasingly annoyed with the questions, but answers. Until he gets to a question involving piloting that he should know the answer to, and he can't answer it, which both freaks him out and scares his wife, like she thinks he's going to attack her or something. Scully and Mulder exit the house, and she wants to know what's going on. Mulder thinks they rewired his brain, and Scully says you can't just go into someone's mind and delete certain files. It would certainly be cool if you could. She suggests a certain type of amnesia. Mulder doesn't buy it, and insists the government can erase certain files, and that is what he thinks happened. As they drive, he says it's so they can control information, that men like Budahas are not actually capable of flying UFO technology at the maneuvering speeds that they were. Scully laughs, and that is when they are intercepted by some government types who insist politely that they get out of the car. They aren't so polite when they finally exit the vehicle, going through their files and wrecking their film and telling them to leave town or else. They seem pretty serious to me. In the hotel room the next day, Mulder says it wasn't Seth Green being chased, but them, and Mr. Budahas's return was a decoy. That he was approached by Deep Throat and told to leave the case alone, and that his phone has been tapped. Mulder believes that there's a huge conspiracy going on here. You know, you gotta love the relative simplicity of the first season or two, before this gets really convoluted and complicated. And ultimately, Mulder is right. There is a giant conspiracy going on. I'm not sure how this experimental aircraft comes into play exactly, but nevertheless, Mulder is right. Scully thinks that if it were true, that they were testing alien technology, it would be a national scandal. Mulder says she's not thinking big enough. It would be confirmation of extraterrestrial life. And if the rumor mill is true, our government has actually recently confessed to alien life, which means they're probably up to something even worse now. Scully says, what if this is just an experimental aircraft, and doesn't the government have a right to protect its secrets? Mulder answers yes, but at what cost? At what point does the human cost become too high a price for a better machine? And Scully says, those are questions they have no right asking. Okay, Scully, but if you're not going to ask those questions, who is? You can't be telling me that the government should just be allowed to do whatever the heck it wants to do without any kind of check on it. Now, maybe you aren't supposed to be that check, but somebody has to be. She says the kidnapped victim has been returned, and they should leave while he still has a job. And actually, I'm pretty surprised that he still does, to be honest. Mulder dramatically grabs the picture he got from the diner and says, aren't you even a little bit curious? And I found myself laughing a little bit at this. This is very Mulder-like action. Taking a picture that Scully doesn't believe in, thinks it's like a fraud, and just being like, hey, aren't you curious? In answer, she sits down and says nothing. He says he's going to take a shower, pack, and then they can get out of there. Scully looks relieved, only she shouldn't be, because Mulder is a big, fat liar. He decides to drive off with the car instead. He gets Seth Green to help him get to the spot at the base, where they got in by the fence. Only they forgot to tell him about the landmines. Details. I'm sure that's not important at all. Mulder hikes out to the field and waits for dark. Night comes, and he spots a craft that hovers over him. Mulder looks at it in wonder, and it seems to scan him before taking off. He's soon on the run from the military police. He doesn't stand much of a chance trying to beat a car and a truck on foot. He's tackled and thrown in the back of the truck. And I do have to wonder what he was even trying to accomplish here. So we see Mulder strapped down. Meanwhile, Scully is trying to call Washington. And it's cute how neither one of them are using cell phones at this point. She talks to the hotel manager about the phones, and he's played by Michael Putinen, who would go on to star in further episodes of The X-Files, playing Dr. Pilson in Sleepless, that would be Season 2, and the train conductor in 731, which is in Season 3, as well as Martin Alpart in Elegy, Season 4. And basically the hotel manager says that the phones are unreliable in this area, mainly, and they actually just blame the military for this unreliability. Whether that's true or not, it's nevertheless what they say. We see a zonked out Mulder who gets glimpses of things before passing out, and one of those things is another spacecraft. Paul the reporter, meanwhile, finds Scully, and Scully tries to reach for her gun, but notices that it's not in her back pocket. She's trying to do this on the sly, so as not to attract attention to her actions. She ends up hearing a radio in Paul's car, and Scully quickly jumps in and finds out who he is. And that's, spoiler alert, not a reporter. Well, that's certainly shocking to me. Scully gets the upper hand on this dude and holds him at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Seth Green's character drives up and tells Scully that they took Mulder to the base. She demands that Paul get on the horn and find Mulder, and he says he can't do that. "Oh, but you can," shouts Scully. "Otherwise, she is going to call every major newspaper and let them know about their experimental aircraft." Meanwhile, Mulder is undergoing the memory wipe procedure. Paul and Scully drive. He suggests there are other ways to go about this, and Scully is not very moved by this comment. They arrive at the gate, and they wait. They actually bring Mulder right to the gate, rather than killing them both. Mulder looks dazed and confused. Scully instructs Mulder to get in the car, which he does eventually after repeated prompting from Scully. Paul lets out one last parting shot before going away, saying that they were the ones acting inappropriately. And I'm hard-pressed to actually argue against this point. I'm not sure that he's really wrong. As Mulder drives, or rather Scully drives, Mulder eventually reveals that he doesn't remember how he got there. They go to see Mrs. Budahas. The wife doesn't want to talk to them, and Mulder suggests, after she ends up closing the door on them, that they got to her. He starts to go on a rant, but Scully has had enough at this point. She says they don't know anything more than when they first got there, and that's what she's going to write in her report. And that's pretty much what she ends up writing. We see Mulder jogging, and he is soon joined by Deep Throat. He tells them that their lives might be in danger, and that care and discretion is now needed. He tells Mulder he can provide info, but only if it's in his best interest to do so. Deep Throat says that his interest is in the truth, and he admits that Mulder saw a military UFO. And then he asks why men like himself believe in the existence of aliens and are not dissuaded by all the evidence to the contrary. And Mulder says that the evidence is not entirely dissuasive. Deep Throat laughs and says precisely, and he starts to walk away. Mulder calls after him and asks, "They're here, aren't they?" And Deep Throat replies, "They have been here for a really long time." And that is where the episode ends, and that's actually a perfect end point for the episode. Like I said, solid second entry of the series, by no means a classic, which will actually happen next week when we cover Squeeze, or whenever it is I get around to it. I'm assuming I'm going to do it next week, but we shall see. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my Core Productions Facebook page. You can buy me a copy, which is a new way to support content creators such as ourselves. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Core Productions, signing off.